Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my History Reaction channel. Today we're going to be concluding Napoleon's Marshals by Epic History. This is part 6 of the series. It's the final part of the series. Tomorrow we'll be back. We'll talk a little bit more about Nelson, since I did promise we'd come back to him at the end of the Napoleon series. And then we'll probably take a couple of weeks off from Napoleon, and then we'll see about picking up with Epic History's new series on Napoleon that they're currently releasing. So look forward to that. But for now, let's go ahead and get into this. We've got 3 more Marshals to go, the big 3. According to their ranking system, these should be the most influential and the best 3. So let's see what they've got for us. As always, I will include a link to the original video in the description down below. If you like what you see here, please head over to Epic History. Let them know that you really appreciate this series. You're really glad to know that they've come back with some new Napoleon content. And yes, we will be getting to it. Don't panic, we will, I promise.
Terror belli, decus pacis. Terror in war, ornament in peace. The words inscribed on every French marshal's baton. In France, the title of Marshal, or Maréchal, goes back at least to the 13th century. It represents the highest possible position of military authority. Authority symbolized by a marshal's baton.
We've commented on this several times because this has been at the opening of every video, so I'm not going to rehash what I've already covered. We'll continue.
The title was abolished during the French Revolution as incompatible with the egalitarian spirit of the age.
Makes sense.
But in 1804, Napoleon founded a new empire and restored the ancient rank. This is Epic History TV's guide to Napoleon's Marshals.
I'm going to do my Napoleon impression.
All 26 have been ranked according to our own evaluation of their achievements as marshals, with expert guidance from Lieutenant Colonel Rémy Porte, former chief historian of the French Army. So far, we've met Marshals Pérignon, Brune, Serrurier, Kellerman, Grouchy, Moncey, Poniatowski, Jourdan, Bernadotte, Augereau, Lefebvre, Mortier, Marmont, Saint-Cyr, Oudinot, Victor, Murat, Bessières, MacDonald, Massena, Suchet, Ney, and Soult. 3. Marshal Berthier.
No one else could replace him. Napoleon.
Louis-Alexandre Berthier was born at Versailles, 10 miles from Paris.
He's kind of an unusual one. He actually starts out in nobility. A lot of the ones we've looked at so far have come from rather common origin, so that's nice to see that there were at least a few nobles in there.
His mother served at the palace as a chambermaid to the future Louis XVIII. His father was a colonel in the Topographical Engineers, a specialist corps of military surveyors.
My grandfather was a topographic engineer in World War II, so good to know that there were some of those out there all the way back here. In fact, I actually commented on that in a video that I haven't actually released yet, but it's coming soon. But yeah, my grandfather was the topographic engineer, topographic battalion, 53rd, I think, during World War II.
Berthier followed in his father's footsteps, joining the Topographical Engineers aged just 13, and was commissioned lieutenant at 17. He proved a talented and diligent staff officer. 10 years later, he accompanied General Rochambeau to America as part of French support to the colonists in their War of Independence, and witnessed the British defeat at Yorktown. By the time the French Revolutionary Wars broke out, Berthier was a brigadier general with 25 years' service, who'd studied and given much thought to the problems of military organization and command. A reputation for outstanding staff work meant his services were in high demand, and he served as Chief of Staff to Rochambeau, Lafayette, and Luckner.
Ah, cool. I really need to get a video at some point on the French contributions to the American Revolution. And I really, really want to do a deep dive into Lafayette because of all the Revolutionary War heroes, if you will, for the United States Revolution. Lafayette is easily one of my favorites. He always has been. He just fascinates me. So let's continue, but I'll put that on my list of things I want to get back to is the French in the American Revolution, and particularly I want to get a pretty deep dive into Lafayette because he's got a great story. Anyway, continuing.
But during the Terror, ties to these politically suspect generals put Berthier himself under the spotlight. He was stripped of his rank and not officially reinstated until 1795, when he became Chief of Staff of the Army of Italy. A Chief of Staff led the Staff Section, which was responsible for turning the general's orders into action, by drafting written instructions which were sent out by courier, as well as every aspect of army administration, ensuring efficient movement and supply, and collating reports on the enemy, terrain, roads, and anything else that might affect operations. Berthier, building on recent trends in French staff practice, now developed his own comprehensive staff organisation. He established 3 sections: his personal office or cabinet, mostly skilled civilian clerks who handled troop movements, transcribed orders, filed reports, and collated intelligence on enemy forces; his private military staff, made up of aides-de-camp, liaison officers and couriers; and the General Staff itself, headed by the First Assistant Major General, also divided into 3 sections. The first dealt with additional troop movements, plus auxiliary services such as hospitals, military policing, prisoners of war, and security of supply lines. The second section organised the army's camps and billets. The third section was the topographical section, responsible for maps and reconnaissance.
Not surprising that somebody with a topographical background would insist on having that in his structure. This is interesting. It sounds like he is very much the administrator type, the guy who makes things happen. Not necessarily the most brilliant in the field, but you need a guy like this, right? You got to have this guy if you want to really do well. Somebody who knows what's going on, somebody who makes sure what you want gets done. This is the kind of person you really, really need and you really, really want to have around.
The general structure of Berthier's system changed little over the next 18 years and proved uniquely effective at handling the challenges posed by a new era of European warfare. Its chief beneficiary would be the Army of Italy's new commander, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon also discovered that his chief of staff possessed immense personal qualities: a heroic capacity for work, meticulous memory and attention to detail, and devotion to duty and discipline. Crucially, he had a gift for turning Napoleon's verbal, sometimes vague, commandments into clear, concise written orders that made sense to his officers and later marshals. Napoleon and Berthier established a highly effective working relationship that would last until 1814. It relied on Berthier's complete acceptance of his subordinate role. He played no part in devising strategy and never challenged or contradicted Napoleon except on points of logistical detail. When a friend queried his devotion to Napoleon, who was an extremely demanding and short-tempered boss, Berthier replied, "Remember that one day it will be a fine thing to be second to Bonaparte." Berthier's hard work and brilliant staff system underpinned all Napoleon's successes in Italy and beyond. They spent so much time together, Berthier was nicknamed Napoleon's wife. He was personally brave too, leading an attack at Lodi and a cavalry charge at Rivoli. But his genius was for staff work and administration, not army command, as he well knew. When he briefly inherited command of the Army of Italy in 1797, he begged Napoleon to return as soon as possible to take over.
That's something else that you need, is somebody who knows their limits, who knows what they're good at, knows what they're bad at. They'll do what they're told to do, but they're going to make sure you know that this isn't what I do, and if you put me here, you're going to get what you get. And somebody who has, over the years, had many supervisor-type jobs on various levels. I never liked the yes men. I liked the people who will set up and say, hey, I can do that, but I'm not the best person for it. This person's better, or that's a stupid idea. I mean, I appreciate that when somebody calls me out. And not everybody does. But I've always felt you need people like that, that are willing to tell you what you need to hear and who know their own strengths and limitations. Like, I can do that, or I can do it, but I'm not the best person for it. Have you considered this person? It's always appreciated.
Berthier played a crucial role in planning Napoleon's Egyptian expedition of 1798, and masterminded his famous crossing of the Alps in 1800, which saw French troops advance almost 100 miles through the mountains in just 8 days.
Which is impressive.
The same year, Napoleon made Berthier Minister of War, putting him in charge of all French military administration. When Napoleon proclaimed his new empire in 1804, Berthier was the first name on the list of new marshals, with seniority over all others. The next year, his role as Chief of Staff, or Major Général of the Grande Armée, was officially confirmed. In the fast-moving campaign of 1805, Berthier's system ensured Napoleon always had up-to-date information about the location and strength of his own forces, as well as the latest reports on enemy movements, from scouts, spies, and prisoners. Such advantages helped him achieve the stunning encirclement of Mack's Austrian army at Ulm. On campaign, Berthier and the Emperor often travelled together in the imperial coach, working without pause. His workload was immense, but so too were the rewards. Following the victory at Austerlitz, Napoleon made Berthier the hereditary sovereign prince of Neuchâtel and Valengian, with an enormous private income. Over the course of Napoleon's reign, he received endowments worth more than 1 million francs per year from the Emperor, more than any other marshal. Yet Berthier remained a liability as a field commander.
Right.
In 1809, Napoleon put him in temporary command of the Army of Germany.
It's really not surprising. It takes a certain type of person to be really good at what he's doing, the administration, keeping track of the numbers, the movement, and so on. That typically is going to be somebody who is well, they already said it, somebody who really focuses on the attention to detail and is highly organized. But field command is, things are changing constantly. It's not necessarily a great environment for this kind of a person, because they're at their best when everything is organized, everything is neat, everything is under control, and active battle almost never is. For that, you need somebody who's better at flying by the seat of their pants, reacting to situations, somebody who's much better on the tactical level, where somebody like this is going to be better in the strategic level, the big picture, and where are we now, where are we trying to get to, how do we get between point A and point B. So different strokes for different folks, and recognizing who's best for each role is probably one of the things that made Napoleon as effective as he was, I would imagine, because putting people in the right position is critical, especially when you're dealing with the kind of things that Napoleon is dealing with during all of this.
When Archduke Charles made a bold advance into Bavaria, Berthier's response was hesitant and muddled, and nearly led to Marshal Davout's corps being encircled.
Yep.
Only Napoleon's arrival averted disaster. Returning to his usual role as Chief of Staff, Berthier once more proved his exceptional talents, coordinating the movement of 200,000 men and paving the way for the Emperor's victory at Wagram. The title Prince of Wagram was added to his honours.
Impressive.
The invasion of Russia in 1812 was a test like no other for Marshal Berthier and his staff. It required coordinating the movement of 500,000 troops, the biggest army ever seen in Europe, across a 400-mile front. "A simple private is happier than I," Berthier complained. "I am being killed by all this work." By August, it was clear the Grande Armée's supply lines were at breaking point, and Berthier was among those who tried to persuade Napoleon to halt the advance at Smolensk. He was ignored. As disaster engulfed the army, Berthier continued to perform his duty. By the end of the retreat, he was marching on foot with frostbitten fingers. When Napoleon left the army to return to Paris without him, he wept openly. Despite his own poor health in the wake of the retreat, Berthier worked hard to salvage the remnants of the army, and served throughout the campaign in Germany in 1813. By now, Napoleon's enemies had reformed their own army general staffs, partly inspired by Berthier's example. But neither Berthier nor his system was perfect. In May, a confusing order to Marshal Ney contributed to his late arrival at the Battle of Bautzen, and a missed chance to crush the coalition army. Berthier was also notorious for his jealousies and grudges. His pedantic vendetta against Jomini, Ney's talented chief of staff, drove him to defect to the Russians. Berthier must also bear some blame for the disastrous end to the Battle of Leipzig. He knew there weren't enough bridges for the army to retreat safely, but failed to press the matter with Napoleon. When the only bridge out of the city was blown too early, 30,000 men became prisoners. Berthier continued to serve Napoleon faithfully through the desperate defense of France until the Emperor's abdication in April 1814. The restored Bourbon monarchy showered titles and honours on Berthier. The king even gave him an honorary rank in his own guard. Napoleon's return from exile 11 months later put him in an impossible situation, torn both ways by his sense of duty and loyalty. He accompanied the king on his flight to the Netherlands, but was treated with such suspicion by the royal court that he left for his wife's family estate in Bavaria.
Probably a smart
There,
move.
a few weeks later, Berthier fell from a window and was killed. It was most likely a simple accident, though some believe he killed himself out of guilt or despair, or, less plausibly, was murdered by French royalist agents. Napoleon had expected Berthier to rejoin him in 1815 and was scathing of his absence. "I have been betrayed by Berthier, who was just a gosling transformed by me into some kind of eagle." But after his defeat at Waterloo, in which mismanaged staff work played an important role, Napoleon conceded, "If Berthier had been there, I would not have met this misfortune." Berthier had none of Murat's glamour, nor Ney's heroism, nor the tactical instincts of Davout. But he was the indispensable marshal, whose brilliant administration and tireless work were the foundation for so much of Napoleon's military success.
I did not know he died by falling out of a window. Interesting. If that was mentioned in a previous video, it went right over my head. Curious to know what really happened there. How do you accidentally fall out of a window? I suppose it's possible if you, but sounds strange to me. But suicide, I can imagine, given what was going on. And they said it was implausible that it was murder, but there are people who probably suspect that. And yeah, I can see an argument for that too. And we do know that not only does that happen, but it happened in that part of the world. So who's to say, right? But it's interesting, and I like how Napoleon comes to understand, once he doesn't have Berthier, just how important the man was to him. Again, you need that kind of person, especially if you're doing what Napoleon's doing. Moving massive armies over huge distances, facing multiple enemies on all sides. You need somebody that can keep track of all that and keep it straight for you. And without that, you're going to be in trouble. And we see that play out.
2.
All right.
Marshal Lannes.
He had truly become a superior being by the time he perished. I found him a pygmy, but I lost a giant. Napoleon.
Jean Lannes was a farmer's son from Gascony who quit his job as a dyer's apprentice to join the local volunteer battalion in 1792. Energetic and charismatic, he was immediately elected to be an officer by his comrades. The unit was sent to fight the Spanish on the Eastern Pyrenees front, where Lannes proved a brave and active officer. He distinguished himself in several actions and was promoted to command the regiment. Lannes was then transferred to Italy as part of General Augereau's division, where his bold, aggressive leadership won praise from General Massena, and then a dago from General Bonaparte himself, who rewarded Lannes with command of a grenadier brigade in the army's advance guard. A month later, at the Battle of Lodi, Colonel Lannes was first across the river, leaping off the bridge and wading ashore under enemy fire. At the Battle of Arcolay, he was wounded twice, but when he heard the French were retreating, he left the dressing station to lead a fresh attack, which probably saved Napoleon from capture or worse. Napoleon later presented the flag he'd waved at the battle to Lannes, and a special bond was formed between them, based on mutual respect and loyalty. Lannes was promoted to Brigadier General, and in 1798 joined Napoleon's expedition to Egypt. He played a prominent role in the campaign, helping to suppress the revolt in Cairo and leading the assaults on Jaffa and Acre, where he was shot in the neck and only saved from certain death by his men, who carried him back to safety.
Is it just me, or are a lot of these marshals getting shot in the neck? I seem to recall there was at least one other. Not a good place to get shot, guys.
At the Battle of Aboukir, Lannes' infantry worked with Murat's cavalry to inflict a crushing defeat on the Ottoman army. While recovering from his latest wounds in this battle, Lannes received painful news from home. His wife had given birth to another man's child.
Ooh.
He returned to France with Napoleon in October and divorced his wife not long after. When Napoleon staged his coup of 18 Brumaire, Lannes helped to ensure the army's loyalty. The next spring, Napoleon's army marched over the Alps into Italy. Lannes' vanguard led the way, and at Montebello encountered an Austrian force that outnumbered it 2-1. Lannes was able to win a brilliant victory thanks to crucial support from General Victor. Just 5 days later, his division played a key role in Napoleon's great victory at Marengo. Lannes never forgot a favour. He and Victor remained firm friends. But he also never forgot a grudge, was notoriously short-fused, and quick to perceive an insult. In 1800, Lannes remarried to Louise Antoinette Guernuc, daughter of a senator, with whom he'd have 5 children. He was also appointed commander, daughter of a senator, with whom he'd have 5 children.
Trying to figure out what this is over this kid's shoulder there. Still not sure. Interesting.
Children. He was also appointed commander of Napoleon's consular guard, but he was dismissed after General Berthier helped expose his mismanagement of the budget, for which Lannes never forgave him. In semi-disgrace, Lannes was sent as ambassador to Portugal, a short, eventful spell in which, against expectation, his soldierly manner won over Portugal's Prince Regent. By 1804, it was clear that all was forgiven. Lannes received news that he'd been made a Marshal of the new French Empire and orders to return to Paris for Napoleon's coronation. The following year, he took command of 5th Corps of the Grande Armée, forming the vanguard for the advance against the Austrian army in Bavaria. Lannes had to work closely with Marshal Murat, a bitter rival since a falling out in Egypt, but they put their differences aside. Together, they bluffed an Austrian commander into surrendering a vital Danube bridge by persuading him that an armistice had been signed. At one point, Lannes even snatched the fuse from a soldier's hand as he prepared to light the explosive charges. The day before the Battle of Austerlitz, Lannes' quick temper got the better of him. He demanded to fight a duel with Marshal Soult, who in his eyes had made him look foolish in front of the Emperor. Soult ignored the challenge. In the battle that followed, Lannes' 5th Corps held the left flank against Bagration's attacks, later pushing forward with the cavalry to help take 7,000 Russian prisoners. After the battle, Lannes was infuriated that Soult, and not he, was singled out for praise by the Emperor. Within days, Lannes had resigned his command and returned to France. In 1806, with tempers cooled, Napoleon summoned Lannes to rejoin the army for the war with Prussia. Back in command of 5th Corps, Lannes was as active, aggressive and brilliant as ever. At Saalfeld, he fought the first major combat of the war, routing a Prussian division commanded by Prince Louis Ferdinand. 4 days later, at Jena, Lannes opened the main French attack at dawn, with General Suchet's division in the lead. For 6 hours, his troops were engaged in furious fighting for the villages on the plateau, until finally, the Prussian resistance was broken. By December, the war had moved into Poland. Lannes attacked a larger Russian force at Pultusk, but it was a bloody, indecisive affair. Wounds and fever then forced him to convalesce in Warsaw, and so missed the Battle of Eylau. That spring, Lannes resumed command of the advance guard, as Napoleon sought out Bennigsen's Russian army, hoping to force a decisive battle. When Bennigsen located Lannes' apparently isolated corps near Friedland, he attacked. He expected an easy victory, but Lannes, with support from future Marshals Oudinot and Grouchy, expertly used his troops to fend off the Russians, while Napoleon raced to join him with the main army. Lannes' delaying tactics allowed Napoleon to catch the Russian army with its back to the river and inflict a crushing defeat. The following year, Lannes was ennobled as Duke of Montebello and joined Napoleon for the invasion of Spain, despite suffering a serious riding injury en route. Taking command of Marshal Moncey's 3rd Corps, Lannes routed a Spanish army at the Battle of Tudela, sending the enemy fleeing in 2 directions. He was then given command of the siege of Zaragoza. Spanish soldiers and civilians defended the city with legendary courage, but Lannes' leadership and methodical house-by-house approach ensured ultimate victory at a high price. Even Lannes was left shaken by the savagery of the fighting, writing to Napoleon, "Sire, this is a horrifying war." Napoleon recalled Lannes for the war with Austria in 1809. His Provisional Corps formed the vanguard for Napoleon's 4-day campaign, a series of quick victories over the Austrians that culminated in the Battle of Egmont. Napoleon next needed Regensburg taken quickly, and so, as usual, he turned to Lannes. After the first assault wave was mown down, Lannes' call for volunteers went unanswered. Furious, he picked up a scaling ladder and shouted, "I'll show you that before I was a marshal, I was a grenadier, and still am."
Oh boy.
As he rushed forward, his aides grabbed the ladder from him, reorganized the men, and led a successful attack. After occupying Vienna, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the Danube in pursuit of the Austrians. Marshals Lannes and Massena led the way across improvised bridges, supported by Marshal Berthier.
Pausing it here real briefly, we're having really bad weather this week. It's causing some internet issues. I was hoping to put off filming until this passed through, but I'm out of time and the weather doesn't seem to be improving. Very high winds, on and off rain, hail, you name it. So occasionally I'm going to have to, you might see some lag or stuttering, things like that. That's what's going on.
Cavalry. It was soon clear that Napoleon had miscalculated and that they faced not just an Austrian rearguard, but the full might of Archduke Charles's army.
Oops.
Massena held the village of Aspern, while Lannes organized the defense of Essling.
Right.
But desperately needed reinforcements and ammunition were held up, as the Austrians floated obstacles downriver to smash the fragile bridges.
I remember that.
Lannes' old rival, Marshal Berthier, was placed.
That floating objects down the river to smash the bridges is a brilliant move. It's one way to deal with a problem with minimal risk. And it's been used in other places and other times. It's a fairly established tactic by this time, but it's useful and it's practical.
Under his temporary command, Lannes sent repeated orders for him to charge the enemy, in language that verged on an accusation of cowardice. And that evening, the two marshals nearly came to blows. The next day, Lannes' corps led an attack on the Austrian centre, but was driven back by the weight of enemy fire. The French-held villages were under constant, pulverizing bombardment. Around 4 p.m, Lannes' old friend, General Pouzet, was hit by a cannonball and killed in front of him. Lannes, badly shaken, walked off to sit alone for a moment, when a cannonball skipped along the ground and smashed both his legs.
Ooh.
Lannes was carried to the rear and placed in the care of the Grande Armée's most famous surgeon, Baron Larrey. Larrey quickly decided that he must amputate one leg. The operation went well, but the wound became infected, and Lannes died 9 days later. Napoleon, who had visited Lannes every day, wept at news of his death. What a loss for France, and for me. Then he wrote to Lannes' wife, "The Marshal has died this morning of the wounds he received on the field of honor. My pain equals yours. I lost the most distinguished general in my army and a companion in arms for 16 years, whom I considered my best friend." Marshal Lannes' death was a great blow to Napoleon and the army. He had proved himself an outstanding commander, as brave as Ney, with the military mind of Soult, the marshal who led Napoleon's vanguard in 4 of his greatest campaigns. His remarkable soldiering skills would be sorely missed by the Emperor in the challenging years that lay ahead. 1.
All right, number 1.
Marshal Davout.
Davout was one of the purest glories of France. Napoleon.
Louis-Nicolas Davout was born into a noble family from Burgundy, with a tradition of military service that went back to the Crusades. At 15, he was sent to the military school in Paris, just missing a young Napoleon Bonaparte, who'd graduated a few weeks before. In 1788, Davout was commissioned into the Royal Champagne Cavalry Regiment. But within a year, his vocal support for the French Revolution had got him into deep trouble. He was forced to resign his commission and spent 6 weeks in prison. In 1791, Davout joined a local volunteer battalion and was elected its deputy commander. The next year, France was at war with Austria and Prussia, and Davout soon proved himself a brave, highly organized and energetic officer. He also won praise for attempting to prevent his commanding officer, General Dumouriez, defecting to the Austrians, though he was not successful. The incident did speed Davout's promotion to brigadier general. But the revolution was now entering its most extreme phase. A new law barred ex-aristocrats from the army, and Davout had to resign his commission once more. A year passed before he was reinstated, with command of a cavalry brigade in the army of the Moselle. He led a series of daring operations against the Austrians, winning particular praise from General Desaix, who became a close friend. In 1798, Desaix introduced Davout to his friend, General Bonaparte. Napoleon was not at first impressed. Davout was aloof, untidy and awkward. Napoleon even described him as a damn brute. But he did trust Desaix's judgment, and gave Davout a command in his army bound for Egypt. It was a tough campaign for Davout, who caught dysentery in Cairo. But he further demonstrated his military skill, winning a series of skirmishes on Desaix's expedition into Upper Egypt, and later leading a successful assault on the town of Abu Qir. Soon after their return to France, General Desaix was killed at the Battle of Marengo, robbing Davout of a close friend and patron. However, Napoleon had been won over by Davout's performance in Egypt. He now promoted him General of Division and appointed him Inspector General of Cavalry. Napoleon also encouraged Davout to marry Amy Leclerc, Pauline Bonaparte's sister-in-law, bringing Davout within the first consul's extended family. It proved a loving marriage and a great source of strength to Davout in the years ahead. In 1803, Davout was given command of the camp of Bruges, where troops were preparing for the invasion of England. Here he established his reputation as an exceptional administrator and hard taskmaster, enforcing discipline and regular training, while paying attention to his soldiers' welfare and sacking officers who didn't meet his high standards. In 1804, Napoleon proclaimed a new French empire, and Davout, aged 34, became the youngest of its new marshals. His inclusion was a surprise to many, especially as he'd still not commanded anything larger than a brigade in battle. It's very likely that the deaths of Davout's patron, Desaix, and brother-in-law, Leclerc, cleared a path for him. The next year, Davout's troops became...
Leclerc died of fever in Haiti, so he was probably over there dealing with the situation in Haiti, because during this time you have the Haitian rebellion in multiple phases. You have the early stage, and then you have the stage where England, France, and other European countries are trying to take it back. So you have the revolution, then you have the kind of a counterstroke during Napoleon's reign, where they're trying to get it back because Haiti is a major cash cow for France. But he can't get it back. That can lead him to selling his New World territories, a good chunk of it, the Louisiana Purchase, to the United States. He no longer had a use for it, but he did have a use for the money. But he acquired that, and part of the reason he wanted it was a support system for Haiti. Haiti would be the cash cow, and the Louisiana Territory would take care of all the other stuff that the colonies needed to survive, plus reestablish French presence in the New World, a serious French presence. So, interesting stuff. Let's continue.
Third Corps of the Grande Armée and marched east, to take on the Third Coalition. On the eve of the Battle of Austerlitz, Davout force-marched his corps 70 miles in 2 days, arriving at dawn on Napoleon's right flank. His troops went straight into action, holding off a powerful coalition attack, buying time for Napoleon's decisive move against the enemy centre. It was a remarkable performance by Third Corps, soon eclipsed by an even greater feat of arms the next year in the war against Prussia. As Napoleon concentrated his forces at Jena to attack what he believed was the main Prussian army, he ordered Davout's Third Corps and Bernadotte's First Corps to cut off their retreat. But 10 miles north of Napoleon, near Auerstedt, Davout ran straight into the main Prussian army.
Oh boy.
With no sign of support from Marshal Bernadotte's First Corps, Davout's 26,000 men faced odds of more than 2 to 1. Davout's masterful handling of his troops enabled Third Corps to repel the Prussian onslaught. Then, his line stabilized, Davout went on the offensive and routed the enemy army. It was a stunning victory, won at a high price. 1 in 4 of Davout's men were either killed or wounded. When Napoleon heard the first report, he was incredulous. "Your marshal must have been seeing double," he told his aide-de-camp, making a joke of Davout's spectacle wearing. When the report was confirmed, he sent a message back to Davout. "Tell the marshal that he, his generals and his troops have gained everlasting claims on my gratitude." He later gave Third Corps the honour of being the first troops to enter Berlin. The next year, at Eylau, Davout's corps again played a pivotal role, trying to turn the Russian flank. When his men were driven back, Davout rallied them, shouting, "The cowards will die in Siberia, the brave will die on the field of honour." This time, Third Corps could not break through, but its tenacity helped persuade the Russians to retreat that night. Following the peace treaty of Tilsit, Davout became Governor-General of the new Duchy of Warsaw, where he oversaw the recruitment and training of Polish troops. In 1808, he was ennobled as Duke of Auerstedt. But for all his military prowess, Davout was not a popular figure. Notoriously tough, his troops respected rather than loved him, while several marshals were irritated by his air of superiority and blunt manner. In 1809, with war looming with Austria, Davout rejoined Third Corps at Regensburg. When Archduke Charles advanced into Bavaria, the army's temporary commander, Marshal Berthier, nearly left Davout to be cut off. As soon as Napoleon arrived, he ordered Davout to withdraw. It was almost too late, but with immense skill, Davout and Third Corps were able to fight their way clear and rejoin the army. Davout played a major part in the counter-offensive that followed, known as the 4-day campaign, pinning Austrian forces at Egmont, until Napoleon arrived to deliver the decisive blow. A month later, at the Battle of Aspern, Davout and Third Corps never made it across the river.
I still can't look at that picture of Charles and not see King Charles, the present-day version. I don't think modern-day King Charles would have done so well against Napoleon. Just don't think so. Could be wrong. You never know. It might surprise us.
The Marshal's role was limited to trying to sort out the crisis at the bridges until the French were forced to withdraw. When the army crossed the Danube again 6 weeks later, Davout was in his usual post on the right wing. On the first day of the Battle of Wagram, the Emperor criticized Davout for his slow attack. But the Iron Marshal, as he was now known, was saving his men for what he knew lay ahead. The next day, Davout's troops fought off a major Austrian dawn assault. then launched their own attack, gradually driving in the enemy left flank, helping to make Austrian retreat inevitable. Davout and his corps had emerged from another major campaign as heroes. The grateful Napoleon bestowed on him a new title, Prince of Egmont.
Okay.
For a few years there was peace in Central Europe. Davout spent most of it in Hamburg, in his new role as Governor-General of the Hanseatic cities, cracking down on corruption and illegal trade with Britain. In 1812...
I never thought of that, but the Hanseatic countries and cities would be a good position to be breaking that blockade. You have Hamburg, you have Danzig, what is it, Bergen up in Scandinavia, and I cannot remember off the top of my head which country it's in now. I feel stupid for that, but I think it's Denmark, but I could be wrong about that. It's silly I can remember the name of the city, but not the country that it's in. Sorry, guys. And others. But they've got a long history of trade between these places, so it makes sense that those places would be a good place for smugglers and blockade runners to be operating out of.
Napoleon entrusted him with the enormous task of organizing the Grande Armée for the invasion of Russia. Davout's First Corps alone was 72,000 strong, as big as Napoleon's entire army at Austerlitz. When it crossed the Niemen River in June, its troops were so well turned out that one observer compared them to the Imperial Guard itself.
Sorry, I had to pause for a second and jump out and take a look and see where Bergen was. It's Norway. I should have known that. For some reason, my brain just froze up on that completely. My apologies to Norway and for people of Bergen for mislocating their city. Let's continue.
Davout's giant corps was the spear tip of Napoleon's invasion. He mauled Bagration's Second Army at Saltanovka, but could not prevent its escape. 3 weeks later, his troops were in the thick of the fighting at Smolensk. But Davout's lack of allies among the other marshals began to show. Many were keen to see him taken down a peg or two, including Napoleon's Chief of Staff, Marshal Berthier, and perhaps even the Emperor himself. When Davout got into a row with Marshal Murat, whom he regarded as incompetent, Napoleon decided in Murat's favor, giving him one of Davout's divisions.
Oh boy.
On the eve of the Battle of Borodino, the Emperor dismissed Davout's request to outflank the Russian defences. "You are always for turning the enemy," he told him. "It is too dangerous a movement." In the bloody battle that followed, Davout's corps led the frontal attack on the Flèche earthworks. The Marshal himself was injured when his dying horse rolled over him, but remained on the field directing the attack, which was ultimately successful. 6 weeks later, the Grande Armée began its infamous retreat from Moscow. The remains of Davout's corps was ordered to form the rearguard, but he was criticized for moving too slowly. Near Vyazma, a gap opened up, and Russian General Miloradovich pounced. First Corps was routed, and saved only by the quick intervention of Marshal Ney, Eugène, and Poniatowski. Ney's corps took over as rearguard, but when he became cut off at Krasny, Davout was widely blamed for not turning back to rescue him, even though it would have been suicidal. The moment highlighted the gulf in charisma between a marshal like Ney, who was loved by the troops, and Davout, who was not. Davout began the 1813 campaign.
Yeah. There's something to be said for being loved by your troops. I mean, respect is good. Gotta have the respect regardless. But having them love you can sometimes make an additional difference beyond what respect will get you. You kind of need both, love and respect. Somebody who's just loved and not respected probably is a sign of a weak commander, or one that overindulges his troops. Somebody who's just purely respected may be good, but if his men don't love him, it probably means that they see him as a little too strict, or pushing them a little too hard. They might appreciate that when they need that, but the rest of the time they're not going to appreciate it.
Holding Dresden. But when Hamburg was raided by Russian Cossacks, Napoleon sent him north to organize the city's defense. Exactly why Napoleon kept his best marshal in Hamburg while a decisive campaign raged in Saxony continues to puzzle historians. Davout was a stern and effective governor of Hamburg, securing the lower Elbe River and Napoleon's strategic northern flank. He organized a new 13th Corps and, following Napoleon's defeat at Leipzig, withstood a 6-month siege. Davout only surrendered Hamburg in May 1814, after confirmation arrived of Napoleon's abdication. But what difference the Iron Marshal might have made at Bautzen, Dennewitz, Leipzig or Long remains a tantalizing what-if. Davout was not welcomed into the restored Bourbon regime like other marshals. His loyalty to Napoleon was despised by the ultra-royalists. Instead, he was forced into retirement and put under police surveillance. When Napoleon returned to France in 1815, Davout and Lefebvre were the only marshals waiting to greet him at the Tuileries Palace. But once again, Napoleon gave Davout a role which, in hindsight, seems a disastrous waste of his ability. Davout was made Minister of War and Governor of Paris, vital roles requiring a brilliant and loyal administrator, and Davout worked miracles to raise a new army for Napoleon's final campaign. But if Davout, not Grouchy, had commanded the Emperor's right wing in 1815, who knows what might have been. Following the Emperor's defeat at Waterloo, Davout organized the defense of Paris and urged Napoleon to fight on. Later accepting that he must abdicate, Davout ensured Napoleon's safe passage to the coast and submitted to the Bourbons. The Royalists had promised Davout that his officers would not be prosecuted for their conduct. He was furious to discover these assurances would not be honoured.
Oh boy.
He also testified on behalf of Marshal Ney, but could not save him from a firing squad. Davout was stripped of his rank and income, though they were restored 2 years later, thanks to the intercession of Marshal MacDonald. Davout shunned court, as he always had. His health was failing, and in 1821, the death of his eldest daughter left him grief-stricken. He died 2 years later of tuberculosis, aged 53. Davout, the youngest and least proven of Napoleon's marshals, proved the most capable of all. Cool under fire and a brilliant tactician, he was the ideal corps commander in battle. A superb administrator, he was a stern and loyal deputy for the Emperor in Poland and Germany. His main weakness was his severe and blunt manner, which won few friends and left some even wishing to see him fail. Not something they saw from the Iron Marshal very often. So concludes our ranking of Napoleon's marshals. 20.
So what do you guys think? Did they get it more or less right? Who would you put as the top three, and in what order? I really can't argue with too much of this. Yeah. I don't see any reason to argue. Somebody asked in the comment who my favorite is. Of all of them that we discussed, I think I have to land pretty much right here with number 6, Suchet. And in today's group, I'd have to probably go with Berthier myself. But that's just me. I tend to respect people who are good organizers, because I'm not. Okay, I'm not. But I have respect for people who are. And like I said earlier, for people who understand their own abilities and strengths and play to them. And I respect people with a lot of integrity, which is why I think Suchet is one of my favorites. And that's one of the things that kind of puts me off with people like Davout, is that he's not necessarily a lack of integrity, but his hard nature. I think that actually cost him. If he could have been a little lighter, he might have been even better than he was. I'm not saying let people get away with things, but he needed a little more charisma, I think. But it is a great what-if question. What if he had been there at the Waterloo instead of Grouchy? Because, as we know, Grouchy just wasn't up to that job. And Waterloo was so closely fought that I think it probably would have made a big difference. I really do think it would have. Would it have changed anything long-term? That's more debatable. But that battle itself, I think having somebody like Davout there probably would have changed the outcome of that battle. But long-term's a different story. Long-term, I think Napoleon still gets brought down. But with Davout there in the field, probably he lasts at least a little longer.
6 dramatic lives that reflect a tumultuous age. Products of a military meritocracy forged in the French Revolution. Skills honed by 2 decades of war.
Yep. And one thing I think we get out of this when we look at the Marshals is that it's a very big mix of different backgrounds. And that is something that comes out of the French Revolution, this idea that a farmer's son or a tailor's son or all these different backgrounds that we see could rise to this rank. This wouldn't have been something that was very common before the revolution. And it's good that Napoleon kept this in place, where he recognized that being born a noble isn't necessarily an indicator that you're going to be really good at what you do. That somebody like Davout, a farmer's son, or not Davout, but we just did it too. Lannes. It wasn't it Lannes? I think it was a farmer's son. Somebody like that can rise all the way to the top and be really good at what he does. You don't necessarily need to limit yourself to the elite. Yeah, Lannes.
Their fates entwined in the rise and fall of empires. History may never see such an extraordinary, diverse and colourful collection of military commanders again.
Yep. I think that diversity helped them. I also think it led to some of the problems they had because of infighting and so on. But some of that was probably on Napoleon himself, because if you got a group like this, you've got to watch for that. Got to watch for playing favorites and even the impression of favorites. You've got to watch for personality conflicts and deal with them. You guys may not like each other, but I need you to work together. You can't do that. I'll find somebody else who can. You kind of have to do that. So, definitely, I agree. This is one of the most diverse group of leaders you'll ever see. It makes it very interesting, colorful. That's why I said that this series actually is more interesting to me than the actual Napoleonic series. Looking at these guys, their backgrounds, where do they come from? How did they get there? Because each one had a very different path, which is kind of neat.
Thank you to all the Patreon supporters who've made this series possible.
Yeah, thanks guys for making this possible.
Visit our Patreon page to find out how you can support the channel, get ad-free early access, and help to choose future topics.
All right, so that's the end of that. That's the end of our entire run through Napoleon. I don't have anything else really that I can think to add, so if you have a favorite, let me know in the comments, and why. Let me know who they are and why you think they're your favorite. And then we'll be back soon for some Nelson. And then, like I said at the beginning, in a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks or so, we'll be back for the new series that they are currently releasing on the 100 Days. So we'll get there pretty soon. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.